Hello, everyone. So, thought this would be a useful resource for everyone as we talk to two women who have actually homeschooled almost from the youngest of ages up to not through college, but at least up to college. So, on the top left is Ellen Choi, and then Shin. So, thank you both for joining me. First, wanted to ask, since not everyone maybe knows you or your story, very quickly, so very briefly, if you could name your kids whom you homeschooled, their current ages, and then maybe just a very brief introduction as to what led you to do that and how was the process and the journey. So Ellen, why don't you kick us off and then Sue after.
Oh, okay. I have two grown children. They are 21, no, 20, I'm sorry, 20 and 18, who's turning 19 today, by the way. So 19 and
happy birthday.
Yeah. So I homeschooled for 10 years, and pretty much on the 10th year, my younger one graduated. So pretty much exactly 10 years. And I mean, just briefly how I got started. I didn't start homeschooling. Both of my kids went to public school. And when my younger one was in kindergarten, a friend of mine started homeschooling. She pulled her son out of school because he had, special needs, and she thought that he would be served better at home. So she started doing that. And then my son was close friends with her, so her son. So to get me to, to homeschool with her, I guess, so that they could play together. And she started inviting me to her homeschool meetings and just talking to me about a lot of it. And even though I knew what homeschooling was, and I thought it was really great, I never thought I would be homeschooling. It just seemed so not me, And so I went to the meetings with her to be, just as a friend, I went. And then, once I started, hearing more about it and seeing how it's done, I just thought, oh my goodness, this is something that I should explore for my kids. So my older son, Isaac, who had just finishing up fourth grade, I thought it would fit him perfectly. I knew that he did not have a good time at school. And I knew this from, I think, starting like second grade. I think he enjoyed it up to first grade. But, I was one of those moms that were at school all the time volunteering, and I could just see that he was just not, he was just bored. And as soon as he got there in the morning, I could see him just watching the clock to see when it was time to go home. He, of course, had complained, and he never really liked school very much except for recess. And then after school, when I pick him up, he would say things like, I'd say, "Oh, Isaac, how was school?" "Fine." "What did you do today?" "Nothing." That was the response I was getting. And I knew. And then also when he came home to do his homework, I felt like I was reteaching the stuff that he should have learned at school. So I was experiencing all of this. And then when my friend was doing homeschooling and I was finding out more about it, I thought, oh, this would be perfect for Isaac. So I asked him, I said, Isaac, you want to homeschool? And he said, yes. Like, not even a second. He said, yes, I want to do that. So that's how I got into homeschooling. I started with my older one first because I was totally new to it and I was scared. So I did it with Isaac first, while Isaiah was still going into, doing second grade. So I started homeschooling my older one starting fifth grade. And I thought in the beginning, I'll just try it for a year. And if it doesn't work, he's just going back to school, starting middle school. So I thought, okay, elementary school, he still has some time to experiment. So that's how I started homeschooling. But even though I started that way, I continued because I saw the difference it made in my students, in my kids. And then after the first year, I got more confidence and just saw how Isaac he just flourished, you know. And so my younger son, of course, by that time was saying, oh, how come I got to go to school and he gets to stay home, type of thing. So then the second year I pulled him out and we both went in full on. And so I have both experience of, you know, having the kids in the public school system and then having to, you know, homeschool in the middle of, you know, them already being on that path. So that's how I started. But it's just been an amazing time. And if I were to do it all over again, you know, knowing what I know now, I would have started from kindergarten, you know, on, rather than having, you know, sent them to school at first. So it's just been amazing for us in so many different areas, not just their education, but it, you know, it just helped me tremendously in the areas of being able to disciple them. And then the more I was in it, I realized for me, this was a calling. I just took it as a calling, you know. So I took it a lot more seriously than just, you know, them schooling at home. I really did take it as a calling. So it's just been amazing. I love it. And my kids love it, you know, and they still love it. So yeah, that's my story of homeschooling.
So we've been homeschooling since the get-go, but it was more out of circumstances too, I would say, in the beginning. Right now we have Jack, who's 15. She just turned 15. And Elizabeth, who is 16. Sarah is 18, and Carissa is 20. So when Carissa was actually a preschooler, or preschool aged, we thought we would try to, you know, find out about preschools in the area. I never went to preschool growing up, so we just had junior kindergarten and then senior kindergarten in Canada. But here they have preschool, so we checked it out, and we realized that it wasn't very affordable at the time. So we just thought, well, maybe we could just, you know, do things at home, read at home, do a lot of play dates with other kids, and just teach life skills at home. So that's how we did preschool. And then when it came to kindergarten age, we were living in Pleasanton at the time, and we tried to sign up Carissa to to register her actually for kindergarten at the school that was the closest. And they were completely full. So we couldn't get into that kindergarten, and we had to go across town to register her at a different kindergarten. And the thing was that she was either probably 5 or 6 at the time, probably 5. And then we had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, you know, 1-year-old, and a baby coming. So we thought, should we do that? You know, should we pack up everybody in the car and have me drive, and then, you know, come back home and then have to go back and pick up? So, so we just thought, well, why don't we try kindergarten at home again as well? And so we did that. And I recall having a friend from Chicago who was the very first homeschooling family that we had ever known. And they had 5 children. They homeschooled, and just made it seem like such a delight because of the relationships that they had with their kids, and how they were all learning to read at home and enjoying one another. So I just remember that picture of them, and that being really, really encouraging. And also, I remember my friend saying that because she and her husband were the main influence upon their children, that they really, really welcomed that opportunity in that home to be the spiritual guide, to be just in every way a shaper of their children's spirituality and the relationships with people and their character growth. So I remember really thinking quite highly of that, of what I saw in them. So that's how we started, and then we took it year by year as well, just like Ellen. Just prayed about it. We were open to having it change, but just felt like every year it was okay. God was calling us, or God was leading us to be able to homeschool once again the following year. But definitely, I did feel like it was year by year, and there were definitely doubtful times along the way. There's so many choices out there in terms of curriculum. I think one thing that was always encouraging was that we were part of a community, a homeschool co-op, or different groups that we would always try to be a part of, so that we'd learn from other moms, other parents, and have the kids be involved with other kids and do all sorts of activities together. So yeah, so that's
Thank
how
you
it started.
both. Awesome. So, question. So I'm going to have a bunch of questions. The first is your own prayer and devotional life. How do you feel as though that impacts your educating of your children? We'll start with Shua and then go to Ellen.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I think it is such a that's just such a big question, huh? I feel like a lot flows from my own time from the Lord, with the Lord, and my own walk with Him. And if I am feeling worried and anxious, fearful about the future, fearful about messing up, all these things will play into how I interact with the kids throughout the day, for sure. And so I think it is really important for myself to be in a place of humbly depending on God through His Word, through His Holy Spirit, in prayer. And I think definitely looking back, I wish I had done so much more of that when the kids were younger. Because I think in the beginning, I had I'm the one who's going to be teaching them mostly when they're young, that I was responsible. And so I felt that pressure and that burden, and I didn't want to mess them up. So I did a lot of research. I would talk to a lot of people, online, internet. There's so much that's available out there. But I think if I had just pursued God even more, in quietness, in trust, in solitude, waiting on Him to show me. And even when there were academic needs or interpersonal, growth, character issues, or learning needs, right, that I didn't feel like I could meet. And I knew I couldn't meet. I didn't have it within me. It had to be the Lord who was going to show me. So I think that that's where the peace that I need comes from, in my own walk with the Lord, depending on Him. And then that flows. And it's amazing how He answers those prayers and shows us the resources that I might spend hours looking for. But when I pray and I ask Him, He answers so quickly, so readily, even just an idea or a conversation or something that is sparked somewhere that I wasn't even trying to look for, but He answers, right? I know Ellen can testify to that too.
Well, I so agree with you about all of those things that you said. For me, because, I started not with, like, I didn't have a slow start where if they were very young, at a very young age, I would have had time to prepare or think about or do research. I mean, I tried to do some of that, but I just didn't have the time or didn't know where to go. I was asking this friend that was helping me, but she only her older son was only as young as my younger one. So I had an older one that I needed to start this right away. So I was totally dependent on God. I was like, I don't know how to do this. And like I said earlier, I took it as a calling. I said, okay, you called me to do this, Lord. So you are really going to have to do this for me because I have no idea what I'm doing. So because I did have a lot of fear in the beginning about the education part of it, that I did just by necessity ended up spending a lot of time in prayer and asking what to do and like what curriculum to purchase. Well, initially, first year I did it through like an alternative school. I did it through Venture. So they gave me all the curriculum, so I didn't have to do any of that. But then after the first year, I was it was up to me to choose. But even then, same with you, Shua, like our kids didn't go to preschool because the schools that I checked out were just too expensive. So I said, it's just expensive playtime. So I'm going to do that at home with them, So I did that. And so when I started homeschooling, starting 5th grade and then later 2nd grade, 3rd grade, once again, the curriculum and things like that I checked into were just too expensive. And I, and then especially at that particular time, we just couldn't afford any of it. So that first year, I only purchased a math book, I think, and then like an astronomy book. And then rest of it, I was like, okay, Lord, I'm just going to have to, I just went to the library and used to what I have. I was making up sheets, their math was at a level where, I could just still for the younger one, make up my own worksheets for them to do, So yeah, so I mean, and then so when I just relied on the Lord for him to, take care of the gaps that are there, if there would be. They're still young, so they weren't much, but I just said, Lord, it's, you have to do this because I think you brought this on to me. It's like you brought this before me and I am doing it. So I'm going to focus on what I felt like I could do, which was spend a lot of time on reading the Bible and doing the devotionals with them and doing Bible study. That part I felt like I could do. Everything else was just, it just became secondary just because I didn't know how to do anything else, So if we had the book, we did it. If we didn't, we didn't. So, and I, and because of that, I did have to go into it asking God for help. And, like you said, when God answered prayer. I had such peace about that part. I was, whenever I got a little scared about, am I going to ruin their life? I thought I had, this peace from God. No, you're not, they're not going to be ruined just because you didn't pick the right book or you didn't have this. Their life isn't that easily ruined like that, So,
Yeah. I feel like the academic requirements and the standards, that the state sets and all of those things, they are there, and but it's not something that we need to overly worry about. Whether our kids are in public school, private school, or homeschool. That's what I have come away with more and more. Just God will show us what our kids need, and as we look to Him to teach us how to guide our kids. And I think the academics part is it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Don't you feel like?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
We're going to talk a lot about that topic. So hang tight on that as we, because So here's another question for you both, which is, this is a time where a lot of people, whether they wanted to homeschool or not, have been at least in some way forced into some sort of quote homeschooling. And then the funny thing is that that very phrase has a lot of, or that word has certain preconceptions, and as well as, the idea that, okay, I'm going to be the teacher, and maybe some parents are thinking, well, I'm not actually teaching them because they're going online, but they are definitely spending a lot more time with their kids than they were previously, without a doubt. I don't think there's a person out there who is not spending significant amount more time, and as well as probably thinking, okay, I need to supplement this. So question, which is, how do people use this time to both support them educationally as well as spiritually? And, in what ways does even the regular things, having conversations, and, what does that look like? You feel like during this time period where people have been thrown into homeschooling, they're not intending to do it. How can they make the most of it? Even if it's what it's looking like, at least it's a good possibility that people at least quote homeschool till the end of this school year. And so it's easy to think, okay, my child's going to be left behind. Maybe they're not skilled enough to do it. What do you say to parents like that? Elena?
Well, it just reminds me so funny. I used to say, because I loved homeschooling so much, my experience was so good. I was saying, oh, I wish everybody could homeschool, at least try for a little bit. But, here we are, everybody in the whole world is homeschooling for amount of time. So I think, oh gosh, what an opportunity. I know it came at this with all, in this, the way it looks, it came this way, but what an opportunity. I remember George Sneeman was saying, I don't remember Wednesday or Friday, that was sort of like a reset, right? And what an opportunity for us to be able to be at our home, get to know our children in a whole, probably a different way, doing schooling with them. And, I think the fear of, oh, are they going to be left behind, or are they going to, forget everything and their education is going to be, just at a disadvantage. I think the important things to remember is that to be able to really look at facts and think about facts, they're not going to be left behind. If they're going to be left behind, everybody else is going to be left behind, right? It's I think I saw a lot of literature and things about how there's going to be gaps in education and all these equity issues. Kids don't have the online or the extra iPad or whatever it is they need. There are a lot of families that don't have that are not equal with every other family. So I think the schools know that. I think the school districts know that. So probably, I'm guessing, knowing, just from previous experiences, that usually when something like this, or this has never happened, but something similar happens, is that the school tries to make sure that everybody's on a similar page. So I think in the fall, probably going forward, they will, revisit a lot of these subjects, kind of try to assess where everybody is. So I think, the fear that your kid is going to be left behind if you don't do all these things, I think is just, just maybe a bit overreaction, I think. I think this would be a good time for us to really take this opportunity, because who knows, you might not get this opportunity again, right? Where you have them 24/7 to not only just do schooling, but really to have an opportunity to talk about deeper things with them, communicate in a better way, almost, get to know them in a deeper way. Because most of the time you spend, they're away 6 hours a day. So you don't see them for 6 hours, and you don't know what they're like during those 6 hours. So yeah, I just think it's a great opportunity, not only just for schooling, but for everything else,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
I feel like it's a great time to be able to do that, build family community.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. A friend of mine was sharing with me just how this time has really brought about for her, opened her eyes to the ways in which she has been relating with her kids in the past. And then now suddenly they're all together 24/7. And she's just really seen it as a gift that
Yeah.
God has given to her to be able to, and she said she's been repenting and seeing her own sin in the way that she has related with her kids and wanting to change and ask God to bring about that change. And so I, I, it's an amazing time to be blessed like that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for my friend's perspective on that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it is a gift from the Lord.
Yeah. And I
So
hope it doesn't get wasted just only doing schoolwork. And
Right.
I hope that's not what happens really.
Mm.
mhm.
Mm.
So here's the challenge, I think, for many people who are encountering this perhaps for the first time, is that there are children of different ages, different learning capacities, different stages of their education. And it looks vastly different based on the number of children in a family, the ages of the children in a family. And so there are so many different contexts. I've listed out, let me see, I have 7 of them. I'm going to just say them. You don't have to address all of them, but I thought you would just sort of take it. So Ellen, you have 2 children, both are college aged. Shua, we have 1 college age, 1 high school senior, sophomore, 8th grade freshman. But you all had them when they were, you were homeschooling when they were pretty young, and Shua, you were when they were infants, which I think is the case for a number of different people. So I'm going to list them off. So one is, let's say, just having a one child, nursery age child, or let's say a kindergartner and a preschooler, toddler, and an infant, which perhaps might be one of the most challenging times, right? Where there's an infant, there's a preschooler, and like a kindergarten 7-8-year-old. 3 children, 1 primary, 1 kindergarten, 1 infant, 2 elementary school age kids, maybe a high schooler and an elementary school age child, 2 or more high schoolers, 1 infant, 1 toddler, 1 kindergartner, 1 elementary school. So in our case, we have 4 children, so we face that. There's a lot of scenarios, but any general principles that the 2 of you would have regarding dealing with educating children of different ages, where some are rambunctious and like wanting to do something, and the other one is needing to study. What do you do with all that?
So I'll let Shua go first, since she's the one that has more.
Oh, I must say that I'm not a great multitasker, so it's always been challenging for me to be able to do to have all the kids at the same time and then do housework or different things, and being involved at church and things like that. But I would say that having a lot of kids, it you learn to be creative, right? With your time, because so let's say if I need to have one-on-one teaching time with one of my kids, then what I would do is schedule an older child with a younger child, their time together. So maybe one is reading with the other, or it could be if she or he's an infant, then the older child could possibly be playing with the younger child, or doing different activities. So let's say it's a 30-minute, 20-minute little block, right? And I'm teaching somebody for 20 minutes. So then I would set up kind of like a loose schedule like that, to say who is with whom for those 20-minute blocks, and then we just rotate it out. So that's just kind of like a helpful way to keep everybody on task doing different things. And maybe if I have to do something in the kitchen, let's say, then I might have a helper with me in the kitchen during that time. But in this way, too, the siblings get to be with one another and get to share, their giftings or their reading abilities or their coloring skills or whatnot with one another. And then another thing that I used was the nap time, whether it was to have everybody do a quiet time while the baby was napping. So everyone is quiet for 30 to 45 minutes. It might be a book on tape or something. You could even have a parent record readings and have that play on the phone. Like if it's dad who's working and isn't able to be there during the day, then dad could record a reading of something. And so your child gets to listen to daddy reading something aloud to you during your quiet time while maybe the child is doing a quiet craft while listening to a book on tape or on CD or through the phone. So that was one way to keep everybody engaged by rotating times with each other. Yeah, that was one idea. How about you?
I didn't have infants. They're only 2.5 years apart. So I pretty much did everything together. I only taught one lesson and then just older did more, or the older one did a little harder level and younger one, make it so that it's easier that he does the other one. But I definitely use that older one helping the younger one for sure. So if I needed to do something, I would have my older son teach my younger son or help him with his writing or whatever he's doing, that they would have that time together, just the two of them, while I do something else. However, there were many times when we were doing our discussions just got longer, and I didn't want to cut it off because it was, it had momentum and it was going. So I would be in the kitchen and they would be sitting at the table, and we're close enough where we can all still talk, and it's just going. We're still discussing about the book or about whatever, but I would be, working in the kitchen and they would be doing it. But I think definitely if you have multiple children, you just got to get creative and not be so hard on yourself about having to do everything. Everybody has to do something differently, or everybody has to be on some kind of a schedule. I think just I think most parents already know, that have multiple children, know how to manage something like that. So I think just whatever it takes, whatever you need to do. And the teaching doesn't have to happen sitting at the table with an open book, right?
Right.
So I think you agree.
Yes.
And so if there was something that you read you need to discuss, you can do that while you're cleaning in the kitchen, helping out, or and everybody for PE time, if you can't go outside, you could clean the house. There's all kinds of things you can do that can be part of your homeschool day. So just getting creative, I think is the key.
Yeah, I think one thing I really appreciated about your sharing, Ellen, in the past, is how you were always asking your boys questions. You were always talking with them, discussing with them. And even if there were some kind of conclusion that you were hopeful that they would come to, you didn't necessarily give that to them right away, but you wanted to have them process and think for themselves as you're asking questions, to be able to come to that kind of conclusion, or at least asking you questions about whatever topic you're talking about, and seeing things from a biblical perspective. Let's say that's ultimately that's what you wanted. And and I remember being really blessed by how just purposeful you were in talking about things with your boys. And I think that's needed. Conversation constantly, communication, and discussing, and really thinking through what we're learning.
Well, I think both of you bring up the point of how education is not just about books.
Mhm.
And that is that there's a lot of different ways to learn. I look at it as the difference between studying and learning.
Mhm.
And studying being you've been given an assignment or a test to study for, and you study for the test, and learning. And so the question is, how do you create a a vision for learning, not just studying?
Mm.
What does that look like? How do you get, or and I know this is I know for ourselves, even for our family, this is something that we are working
Mhm.
on, hoping for,
Mm.
and it's easy.
Mhm.
But how do you get kids in this type of environment to want to learn?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I think that's what successful homeschooling does. And successful education is really, I think it
Mm.
should be that the students should love to learn and, have a passion to learn and want to discover and not just worried about, you know, getting that mark on the test or whatever. So I think, I think I want to go back to what Sua said earlier about, when you're all as a parent teacher anxious about um, how they're going to do, that's gonna come off and show. That's gonna the
Mm.
kids are gonna know,
Yeah.
pick up in the same way that if that isn't your goal, if your goal isn't that your kid you're wanting to instill a love of learning into your children, but that they just
Mhm.
get that worksheet done and they get it all right, then
Mhm.
that's what they're gonna, I think, learn.
Mhm.
So I don't know if this, I believe this is, it's my belief that we never had a goal of, as far as learning was concerned. It was never there was never a set goal as far as like, okay, your goal this year is like all A's or something
Mhm.
like that, right?
Mhm.
Um, our my personal thing was that I didn't want them to take schooling and think of it as a goal for college
Mhm.
and then beyond job. That's, we rarely ever talked about that. The idea of college didn't come up until like they're, like 10th grade,
Mhm.
and and their grades, report cards. We never really talked about that. They didn't even know what they got on their grades. It was the focus was always about, we were just into learning and we were just
Mhm.
continuing doing that throughout the day. So it was never oh, okay, you got that done, so that's done. So I think, for my kids, they always, learning was just constant no matter what. We could be
Mhm.
driving somewhere and we're still talking about what we were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
um, for me, it was fun to do that. I wanted to get to know my kids,
Mhm.
so as students and as, and I always thought it wasn't just homeschooling, it was just discipling. I took that,
Mhm.
I felt like, God gave me these two people, and these are the two that I can disciple, that, not anybody, not a stranger. These two I can do at
Mhm.
home. And
Mhm.
so it was really more for me too, but I wanted to know what they thought of all kinds of things. I wanted to know where their hearts were about a lot of things, So
Mhm.
I was constantly, asking them questions, and they gave me an answer, why. And
Mhm.
when we were doing schooling, even schooling, when they say, well, why do I need to do this? Why do I need to learn this? It was never a one answer, because I told you so,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, I told you so. But then there were all these other reasons. And then that led to a discussion of
Mhm.
why it's important to learn this, and how does this help? How does this, what is this? How does this help me as a person? How do we look at this in a biblical view, And so
Mhm.
it was constantly something like that. It was organically always school
Mhm.
going on all day long. and
Mhm.
then and then when I got too tired, they, my kids, they went off on their own, and they're talking
Mhm.
and discussing too continuously. So a lot of our schooling didn't necessarily just happen just sitting down. Sometimes that was easier. I wish that sometimes like, okay, sit and get this done so that we can be done for the day. But it never got done like that. It was like, all day, all evening sometimes. And so I think that's where they kind of got the idea of, okay, learning isn't just from books or just from, it happens all the time. If they wanted to learn something, they'll find resources they ask, they look, they search, they find out, they read, that they're on their own to do that, because I couldn't always do that.
Yeah. And I really enjoy talking with your sons, Ellen, because they're so unique and different from each other, and their interests are so different from each other. And truly, they do love to learn what they love. It's really amazing just seeing the fruit of all that, because Isaac loves philosophy, he loves reading, and he loves discussing philosophical topics. And and Isaiah is into music and languages, and he was such a great people person. So all these things, I see the fruit of it. And I think hand in hand with the love of learning, something that's really important is the character growth part of it. And I think that's where maturity, it comes with maturity, right? As you're growing to learn to appreciate and be grateful for the opportunities that God has given to you to learn about his world, whatever that topic or subject might be, whether it's math or whether it's botany or anything that you're given to learn, and you appreciate it and are grateful for that opportunity to learn about the world that God has created. I think that our children may start to get that as they grow and mature spiritually, character-wise, and learning that it takes diligence to even pursue something deeper, right?
Yeah.
And to realize, okay, I can't take a shortcut to learn about this kind of philosophy, or, you know what I mean? Because I think a lot of times we're looking for a shortcut, and our kids are too. So when we realize, okay, we got to buckle down and do the hard work of learning and enjoying and appreciating, I think that's when the love of learning comes. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, let me ask you this follow-up to that, which is, what if they don't love to learn? So let's say you're a parent, you have a child. Now, I have some theories behind this alongside with some thoughts, such as maybe there's a good corollary to this question, is the idea of a lot of kids who are so addicted to screens, video games, movies, all sorts of just looking at their phone and whatever, Instagram, it could be anything like that. And they've left behind one of the most valuable means by which kids love to learn, which is book reading, right? So obviously it's easy to say, yeah, cut all that screen time off, which can be done, but that doesn't necessitate or automatically lead to, oh, suddenly I love reading books. So what would you say to the parent who is struggling with their child looking at the screen and not wanting to read books that helps them to learn? And how do you get them to that place?
Well, I have a student that doesn't like to read either, so only certain types of books. But I think, if you have young children, I think making sure that they don't already at a young age rely on the screen to fill up times when they're bored or anything. I think that's just really important, right? I think that all parents would agree. I think once it's tougher when they're older, much older, and they're already gotten used to like being on the screen and on their phone all the time. It's really hard to pull them away later. So you have young children, to get them started early, not, living life without the screen, I think, or video games, I think would be so much helpful. It's just so much helpful for that. But I think I do want to say, I don't know if this would be somehow related for some reason. I think it is, but that, you know, I don't believe that people don't want to learn. It's just depending on what it is that they want to learn. I mean, I think one of the reasons they're on the screen is to find out more information about whatever else they want to know. I think a lot of times parents have not had an opportunity to know their kids in a deep way, like what they're interested in, what their likes are, what they're attracted to, what's captivating their hearts. I think somehow, it's all on the screen, and they've just been, sort of hijacked into that. So I think this time that you have at home, I think, yes, you can say, no more screen, but when they're off the screen, I think the parents should take opportunity to learn more about their kids. What is it about being on the screen that they're so attracted to? Is it loneliness? Does it feel like they need to be connected to somebody? If they're looking at, let's say, the newest, trends or something, is that filling some kind of void in them that they're not getting from, people, right? So, I think you can find out what it is, and if they connect to something that they really love, and identify it, I think they would just, the desire to learn more about that and to follow that would happen naturally. I think even younger, the youths, they don't even know what it is that they're, what they love, or what they're capable of, what their gifts are, what their passions are, so they've been so busy just doing schoolwork and coming home, and any little time to relax, they want to be on the phone to hang out with their friends, and really not having had the time to really even self-discover in that way. I think finding out what it is that you really truly love and what your gifts are, I think would be tremendous as far as, education and pursuing something, right? And I think once you love that, you wouldn't go to the phone. I don't think you wouldn't be on there. You'll be, or if you are, it's for the purpose of learning or, discovering or something like that, and not to waste time. Although, I think something that is unavoidable a little bit, but yeah. What do you think, Shua?
Just an idea that came to mind when Sam was asking that question. I thought, that'd be kind of cool if somebody, let's say a high school student, wants to read a book that they're interested in, maybe some kind of genre, maybe it's like mystery or detective or something like that. I don't know. And then they ask a couple of friends to do a book club, and maybe they're not into reading as much, but if they want to be able to interact with their friends during this time, I don't know. I just thought of that, but
I think that's a great idea. If they did that, and then when they get on their Instagram or whatever to discuss, or in a meeting like this, using this, they could. It's a book club where they're discussing about the book, right? That's a way to connect with their friends. And because this is kind of fun with the screens like this. But
yes,
I think that's a great idea.
I think one thing, this is just my observations and thoughts, is that I think when it comes to screens, it is very tempting for parents to utilize phones, iPads, video games as a babysitter, because we want to do certain things, you know what I mean, without necessarily having to really engage kids about things. And so it, have I frozen? Well, sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we were saying now you have to edit because, right?
No, I'm not going to. But
No,
I
you
would say,
should, because
I would say that
just edit that part out.
I think people use, they use, you know, screens as a babysitter.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
in many ways, it's actually, whether we want to admit it or not, it's the parents who create and foster a habit. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I remember when I was young, I wanted to play Atari all the time. I didn't even have it. My parents never bought it for us. But if we had it and they let me, I would play it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand it. I understand why a kid, of course, they're going to want to do that. Of course, they're going to want to play video games all the time.
Yeah.
If they're given, it's like a child at a very young age, and
Yeah.
they're given something. So it is about parents doing what they can within themselves. Actually, I feel like it's fighting their own flesh to say, okay, I know it'd be easier for me to just stick this video with this movie in front of my kids so that they can watch it, so that I can have my own free time. But by doing that, it's really long-term pain, short-term gain. And
Yeah.
I think I'm not a person who says, oh, there's no place for video games, there's no place for movies, but I think it has to be truly controlled, and a way in which, like what we do with our kids, and just as a practical tip is, like my son, my two youngest kids, and they're not that young, right? They love video games. And so for a while, they would always ask, can I play this and that? And we got tired of them asking, actually. And so eventually I came up with an idea of creating what I called a credit system, where basically I actually printed it out on a piece of paper, and it was these little tickets. And sort of they would have to earn a credit to be able to play, say, a half hour. And it would be based on not chores, because chores are things that I believe kids should do because they're part of the family, not necessarily because they've done something special. I don't think allowance is about that. I just don't see that. I think kids should do things because they're a part of the family.
Yeah.
But extra things, it could be, oh, there's the credits.
Oh, wow. That's cute.
So they would, if they clean the garage, I would say, all right, Jack, I want you to clean the garage. And if you do, you'll get 2 credits, which would be maybe an hour's worth. And we would let them play not during the school year, but only during, say, during vacations, holidays, maybe their birthday. They could cash in those credits, or maybe they can have an hour. But it would never be, oh, you just play as much as you want. And then we would really throw in to the process of get them to read as much as possible, and read anything. Read Calvin and Hobbes, read books on all sorts of genres. It could be fantasy, it could be, mystery. Just get them at a very early age. Read with your child when they're a baby. Read Bible stories. Read read children's books. We would read. I would read to them, and Sue and I would read to them, like, what's Beverly Cleary, right? Ralph S. Mouse and Ramona the Brave, and you get them early, and then slowly but surely they start wanting to do that on their own. That becomes their desire. The love of learning doesn't come from you sticking a video in front of them all the time. That just destroys the love of learning. So even though it's hard, because sometimes it's so much more convenient to actually stick that iPad in front and let them watch a video, make sure if you're going to do that, that it's actually intentional. Like, okay, you have 30 minutes and that's it for the day, whatever it might be. But it can't be, okay, here, take this, do this, and do it without limit. What do you both think about what I just said?
So I think you were mentioning it as being a reward, right? So for after they've done school, or whether it's on the weekends or holidays, if it is part of your family life at all. And if anybody wants copies of these credits, please feel free to email and we'll just send it to you.
Yeah. You don't need them anymore, right? You could probably just give it away.
Oh no, we still
Oh
need them.
no, we need them.
Oh, really?
We
Yeah.
still need
Oh,
them
yeah.
a lot.
Oh. Well, I mean, we never, our kids never got into video games. So I'm thankful for that. I try to,
That's great.
yeah, and when they had times with their friends and they were playing video games, they just couldn't participate because they didn't know. So I thought, oh, okay, maybe they should kind of learn, So I remember I had bought them like a game system a long time ago, and I brought it home, and it was actually a Wii. It was supposed to get them to move around and do more in the house. They didn't even open it. They didn't even open the box. So, but I think, going on with what Pastor Sam is saying, also I think they need to see the parents reading too, right? So when they see the parents reading, it's just like Bible studies. It's a discipling thing, modeling. They see their parents reading the Bible, praying, going to church and worshiping, doing community. It's like, they model or they follow what their parents do. So I think if you tell your kids to go read and the parents are on the phone, or on the screen, I think that doesn't send a good message. So I remember years ago when I was at, I think Wilmot's, one of the Wilmot's meetings, we were saying this, that even if you have to sort of intentionally like show that you're reading your Bible, like, if you've already done your devotional in the morning and later on you don't need to, but I said open your Bible and read and let your kids see you read it. Because if you do it early in the morning and do your time, they may never see you, right? So we're thinking, all right, I did my quiet time with the Lord, I don't need to. But I think throughout the day, even if you've already done it, you open your Bible and sit and let them watch you read after lunch or whatever, right? Because they kind of need to see their parents do it, especially if they're younger. So yeah, I think you can't just tell them to go read something. It's just not going to happen, especially if they're not a naturally a reader, right?
Yes.
So
there's oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that just reminded me of when Ellen was describing that, of Ruth Graham, who was so busy raising her kids that she didn't feel like she had adequate time to spend time in the Word, and so she had several Bibles open throughout the whole house. And then in each room, so she's in the kitchen and then she'd be reading while she's doing something, and then I think everybody always saw her Bible open everywhere because she needed to feast on it herself. Yeah.
Good. The big C word.
Dark in the house.
The big C word. You know what the big C word is in homeschooling? Curriculum.
Oh, okay.
It is the 800-pound gorilla of homeschooling, which is there's so much out there, right? I mean, compared to even when we were starting, and now there's a lot online, and I know a lot of the people who are homeschooling now, or who are even looking into supplementing what they're doing in this situation, has done a ton of research. And we know, there are people who literally will buy, if they can afford it, will buy every curriculum out there, and but jump from one. And I remember when we were homeschooling at the youngest of ages, and I would always be like, so let's just stick with one and go all the way through. And we had different philosophies even about that. So what advice do you give to someone as they're contemplating all the different curriculum, supplementary, primary, and how do you work that out? What does that look like?
Mm.
So what?
Well, I would say that my that was actually a weakness of mine because I saw so much that was out there, and anytime I became discontent with something, I always felt like the grass was greener on the other side. So then I'd be asking my friends, "What are you using for this? Does this work for you?" And then you're like, "Oh, well that looks shiny and new." So, why don't I try that one out too? So that, in that sense, I think that's always a temptation to feel like
Yeah.
there's got to be something better out there. But I think if we found something that worked for our kids, even if they might have thought it was like really dry and boring, or um, it's so funny because sometimes I'll mention a book and I get this real visceral reaction from my kids still to this day. They're like, "Oh, that book was," yeah. But I found that if it worked, if they learned grammar through it, through the consistency of doing it, um, then we would stick with it. However, I didn't feel that we had to do every single number in every single lesson. If they get the grammar, they get it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel like we had to do that every.
Was that rod and staff?
I love rod and staff.
Yeah. Yes, rod and staff.
Well, I think, curriculum is one of the biggest temptations for homeschoolers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I loved going to those conventions and looking at all the new, the shiny new curriculum that's out there. And, I just before the lockdown, I met a new homeschool family, and I went and met with them because they were interested in knowing, how to do this and all that. And they weren't believers, but they had bought all this Christian homeschooling curriculum. It was really interesting. But she was into it 2 months, and her oldest one is in first grade. But she had more curriculum. I mean, her bookcases were full. I said, I ended up telling you got to stop buying, because first of all, you won't use 80% of this. And secondly, at this rate, she's like, you're spending all your money in first grade, save it for later. So I think, curriculum is just a huge temptation. But what I did tell her was that, great curriculum doesn't necessarily translate into great education. It has to be the right curriculum, right? And then it has to be something that has to be right, not only for the student, but for the parents. But so much of what happens in the textbook that gets to the kid is much, more that needs to be done than just the book, right? So just because you have great curriculum, because I think the mom was, and I was the same way. If you have this great curriculum, they're going to learn everything in here and it's going to be successful, which is really not the case. That's been my experience. And my kids, of all the curriculum that we've had and ones that I spent most money on, were always they all ended up not being the right ones. And the ones that were the most effective ones happened to be the cheapest, or something that I got from the library, or something somebody gave me, the Bible, it's like the Bible is amazing for reading, when you have to do read aloud, or you want to let them read, for vocabulary, grammar,
spelling.
Spelling. We didn't hardly do spelling because reading takes care of when you read with your kids, and then when they become their own reader, it knocks out a bunch of other subjects. You don't have to sit there and do, and then you could just do Bible study and get geography done, because you can look up the map where this was, and then you do history you can put in there. So with just the Bible and age appropriate Bibles, or Bibles that could fit your personality in your children, you could do all kinds of subjects. So I remember I was talking to this mom many years ago about, before I was even homeschooling, we were all thinking about, oh, how do we get our kids to read or do better at English? And we all said, oh, let's just have our kids read the Bible. And we did. And the result was amazing, you know? So
yeah.
I think if you have young children, you sit there and you read to them, they can read to you, read back to you, you can do discussion, you can do spelling with the Bible, you can do geography with the Bible, you know, you can just do all kinds of things. So I don't think you need shiny, expensive, whatever's out there curriculum and thinking that that's going to be better education. I just don't believe that. I mean, it wasn't true for me. And so if that was the case, then all we needed to do was buy curriculum, right? For great education. And that's,
So you want to add to that?
So true. Well, I was just thinking that there is a lot out there for, in terms of reviews, resources, blogs, where a lot of families who have used curriculum effectively have written about different things. So, so if you do want to do that research, it's definitely possible. And I think it's important to also find out what kind of a type of learner your student is. That is very helpful too. So then you see what fits. But one thing that we might fall into is also the belief that it's got to be fun for our kids in order for them to find it effective. And again, I think it's because we all might want to look for that shortcut that just makes it easier to learn. But a lot of times it is going to take the hard work, right, of the foundation, setting the foundation. So, and that might not be quote unquote fun, but if you do the hard work in the beginning, it makes the later years, the latter years, more fun, right? Because if you're learning how to read and you get that down, the hard work of getting that down, then you're freer to read more difficult books, more fun books. So,
absolutely.
Yes.
I'm going to ask 3 more questions and then we're done. Okay. So the first one is spouse. What role do they play? So maybe I'll answer first since I am the spouse, and then I'll have Shua supplement what I say or comment on what I say, which is our story is that I was not in favor of homeschooling. Actually, when we first started, it was something that Shua felt convicted by. She brought it to me and she said, let's go to this conference together and we can explore. So I went. It was a CHIA conference, Christian Homeschoolers Educators Association. And I know Ellen knows that conference and most homeschoolers in California know it. I don't think it's Christian. I think it's California, right? Maybe. Well, anyway, that's what C is, California, not Christian, I think, right? And I was very turned off from homeschooling because of that conference. It was strange. People, I saw a lot of people
were strange, right?
People were strange. I went to a one seminar and all he talked about was how we should all go back to the Mayflower and as homeschoolers. And I was thinking, my family was not from the Mayflower. And so, and I looked around, there are a lot of people wearing head coverings and big denim overalls. And I thought, I don't dress like them. So my first impression of homeschooling was that. And that made me think, okay, I don't want to do this, but but Shua was very much wanting to do it. And I thought, okay, I'll just, we had a lot of disagreements initially about this. And there are numerous times where I thought, I don't know why we're doing this, but I'll go along. I think it wasn't until maybe actually till the end of the elementary school years, around 8th grade, and we were approaching high school, that I began to, I can't remember, Shua, exactly, maybe you can remember, but there was a turnaround. The turnaround, do you remember what the turnaround was?
I think it was around the middle school age time, where I think we had more discussions probably, and it wasn't as much the rote memory learning from their elementary years. And
I think I saw fruitfulness.
Yes.
I
Okay.
think I saw, oh wow, we haven't messed them up that badly.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning there's this fear that we're just gonna mess them up. Like I don't know what we're doing, and then when we're getting to the age where, okay, there's this fork in the road. Either they're gonna go down and fall off the cliff, or they're gonna thrive. And I began to see a little bit where there was a much more independent desire to learn, and that was surprising actually for me. And then I think, okay, I could see that. And then secondly is so I haven't, there are certain parts of homeschooling that I've been a part of, like just some of the practical things like driving or signing papers, and maybe initially I would do a little bit of helping on the grading or maybe planning side of things, but didn't do that much. Shua did most of the research, administration, as well as the teaching. And then by the time I hit high school, I decided to, I started teaching, working on a class. So I taught one class for all of our kids. It's world history. And what I did was I developed it over a year's worth. And it basically, I try to use the Bible as sort of the spine upon which world history is played out. Because I think actually that is world history, is it's really biblical history with world events all sort of, you know, jumping on top of the foundation of biblical history, you know, and world events. And I think that's happening even now. And so that was very, very enjoyable. Actually, I still teach it to this day. I'm teaching it to both Elizabeth and Jack, and have them write papers and do that. So there, I think when it comes to a husband or a wife, like let's say, and I'm not going to assume one or the other, but whoever is doing the main teaching, the other person can really supplement in the way in which they work best. For example, both Sue and I are not math and science people, but if let's say I was a math person, that definitely I would probably maybe help out more in that area. I wish we were one of us was a math science. We just don't have that in our family. We're both humanities people.
Yes.
And but I do think that there's definitely a way a spouse can at least supplement that with work or administration, maybe projects if they're really skilled with the hands, which I'm not either. But there's maybe it could be just Bible teaching, or it could be you know, scripture memory, or you know, social things such as joining clubs, sports. So all those things that come alongside. I know, like for Gabriel, he does that a lot, right? Like he focuses in on the supporting Isaiah and the golf side of things, right? And so I think there's various different ways that a spouse can walk alongside. But Sua, anything to add on that from me and you?
One thing that I really learned through the whole process was about being able to submit ultimately. And I mean, I'm still learning that, but submitting to my husband's leadership in the home when it came to, for example, financial decisions, and especially with the curriculum buying. You know, like I said, I see something shiny and new, and I'd be like, "Oh, I think I want to try that one." And so when I brought it to Sam and we discuss about it, and then he'd say, "I don't think that we can do that," or if I wanted all 4 of our kids to play a musical instrument, to take piano lessons, all 4 of them, which is extremely expensive. But for some reason, I didn't really think about that part of it. I just thought, oh, well, you know, my brother and I took piano lessons growing up, so I think all 4 of them should, right? I just thought that that would be part of their education, and that was the way that I saw it, as the only way. But discussing it with Sam, again, seeing that financially it wasn't feasible, and just releasing that unto the Lord ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
and to Sam's wisdom that God has
Mm-hmm.
given to him to lead us, is something that I really had to learn and die to myself about. When it came to the overarching decisions about the vision for our school, and we would talk about it and discuss and pray together about, especially about the needs for our kids, whether it's academically, socially, spiritually, physically, all of those things we had to discuss. And I had to relinquish my feeling like I'm entitled to get this because I'm the one who's doing most of the schooling when they were younger. Now it's more about managing their classes, driving them around. So I'm just more like a GM than anything. I don't really do any teaching at all. But still, I see that, like Sam and I, we have to be partners in this together. Otherwise, I think there would always be conflict because we have differing viewpoints and differing, probably, visions for our kids. So I think praying together too, that is really, really important. Praying together for our kids, praying together about how we can raise them in the Lord. So.
Well, for me, my husband couldn't really be involved as much as he wanted to because he was, out of the house a lot, working. So, I was the main decision-making person. The whole idea of homeschooling, it was, my idea. And so I had to, like, with everything, I always felt like I needed to present it to him, right? So if I needed to do something, usually, I pray about it, and I want to make sure that I'm not just jumping into something. So I had to do a lot of decision making, and needed to have, if I'm going to present it to my husband, I was presenting it to get a yes, right? So I had to make sure that I eliminate all the things and all the reasons why he would say no, and it had to be a tight case, right? Sort of. So a lot of thinking and praying and preparing went in before I told my husband. But by the time I did that, like, it was a pretty tight case. He didn't see a reason why he couldn't say why he could say no, or why he needed to say no. And if he did, I say, well, because of this and this, and here are the reasons why it needs to happen or it doesn't happen. And so, of course, he said, oh yeah, okay. That was most of the answer. And I did have to look outside, for resources, because he wasn't able to participate in the teaching. So if I needed, math help or science help, that I needed to do outside of the home. For PE, I did ask for help for PE from him, but he did what he could. If he was busy, then I had to take care of that. It was, there wasn't too much of, like this. I know some families, the both, parents are very involved, and they take, they divide and conquer. That's great if you could do that, but if you can't, it's still doable. I think it's really doable. And so, but yeah, we did, if there are issues, we did pray together about it. And I think more than my husband and I praying for the kids, because I had the kids with me, we were actually praying for my husband a lot together. He'd go off to work, and I know the struggles he was facing or whatever he was going through, and I'd share that with my kids, and like, okay, let's spend some time praying for dad, because he's really gonna need it. We're at home, enjoying this time, and dad's, so but going back to, like, what's wonderful about homeschooling is, you mentioned it way in the beginning, so about how your friend, how the tight, close closeness of the family, and because of that, they're not facing the challenges of peer pressure, right? That they're more inclined to listen to, what me and my husband as parents think rather than what their friends and their peers think. And because of the bond that we had built, because of the time we spent with each other and just really getting to know each other deeply, they really do value what I think and what my husband thinks more than what they hear outside. So anything that comes up, whether it's even a sermon, or if, they always ask me what I thought of it. And then I then when we talk about it, or what I think of, whatever that's happening in their lives, they always want to know if, they're checking to see what our views are, and then to see if, however they're thinking is right or wrong, or are they being persuaded by, what they heard on the internet or what their friends said. That I don't think I could ever exchange for anything. Even if we didn't, let's just say, even if we didn't get any education done, just to be able to have that, I think. And then, I always thought, my job as parent educator, I am educating them, but because I had this opportunity to have them at home, my primary job was not only teach them because they had books and other things. And if they ever got behind, I always thought, okay, well, they can go learn at the community college and do, they could get the education somewhere else, right? So I'm thinking, what is it that God is wanting me to, teach them? And I thought, I'm only going to be responsible for, not for their education. If they didn't get any education, I thought, well, they can go get it somewhere else. So I'm not going to be responsible for that. But that I could just hold their hand and just lead them to Jesus, and then I can drop them off with Jesus once they have their relationship, right? So because of that relationship with me and my kids were just quite important, to me. That was a priority. So, I mean, I think I, have been criticized about sheltering them, or, being a helicopter parent, or, wherever that is. But to me, education or homeschooling or whatever it was they were doing, golf or whatever it was doing, it was always that I wanted to be there so that if they were to stray this and that way, I can always say, oh, no, not that way, this way to Jesus type of thing, So because of that, I didn't have all that fear too much of what if they fall back? What if they didn't get this, what if they didn't get their, as far as education, that just sort of took a back seat to other things. So I think that's one of the biggest thing about homeschooling that I can say was such a gift, is that I was able to, my husband and I have been able to play that role of, guiding them to Jesus, and helping them spiritually. That's something I feel like that they can't get just anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that would alleviate a lot of the fear that I think parents may have, especially during homeschooling, that even if they don't get hardly anything done, it's okay. Get the other thing done, the most important thing done.
Yes.
And God will take care of whatever. And we're not going to be messing up their lives. People's lives aren't messed up that easily, right? God is in control.
Yes.
Just because you didn't pick the right curriculum, it's not, if it was left up to me, I don't have that much power, right? Curriculums don't have that much power. So I think just to remember that God is watching, and he sees, he loves our children more than we do. He wants them to be educated more than we do. So I think that trusting that alleviates a lot of issues about, is my husband helping me? And are we getting this curriculum? Are we doing this? I think if we have our priorities straight, God will take care of, help you take care of all of that, just like you were saying earlier.
He enables us in whatever he's calling us to do. And
Yeah.
what you're sharing, Ellen, reminds me of Matthew 6:33 about seeking him and his righteousness and his
All
kingdom
these,
first. And everything else that he thinks that we need will be added to us.
Yes.
And so that really does alleviate so much of that pressure we might put on ourselves
Yeah.
to make sure our kids are, up to speed as the world might have it. But
Yeah.
like you said, you're leading them to Jesus. And that's what we should be seeking. He'll take care of everything. We just need to be faithful to what he has called us to do.
Yeah. He does.
Yeah.
He's a promise keeper.
Amen.
2 more questions. So we'll try to do these 2 as fast as we can. One is, how do you keep your place organized? What is scheduling, planning, organization look like in the midst of homeschooling? Because that's not something that most people send their kids off and then they could take care of everything. When you have your kids all around, it gets chaotic. And when your place is chaotic, sometimes it can wear on you a little bit. So what is that? How do you work that out?
Go ahead, Shua.
Well, I've had 2 resources that I would go to time and time again to help me just with thinking through systems to have in place in the home to make things run a little bit more smoothly. And I would say when they were younger, definitely I did that more, or thought about that a lot more and try to put that into place, implement it. But one is called Managers of Their Homes. And if anybody wants to take a peek at these things, please let me know and I can totally show you. And then another one is actually online. It's called Simplified Organization by Misty Winkler. And she's really great about helping you to think through your day and how to organize your schedule, your family schedule, systems, things like that. But I think it was just really important for me personally because I could go to one extreme or the other where it would be very, very tightly scheduled in our day, what we had to do. And I had to be very, very much a stickler about that or feel like I had failed. And I think that's one extreme. And then the other extreme is, just throw it all away and be loosey-goosey and try to do things super last minute. And but I think both extremes really reveal just my sense of self-reliance and pride. And so I think having a loose schedule that helps to organize your day and depending on the Lord to be open to interruptions as he might bring them to us. And we might consider them interruptions, but they're not according to him, because he's planned our day in such a way so that we would be open to whatever might come, people who might come, needs that might come. So
for me, whenever I had things tightly scheduled, which when you first schedule it and you look at it, I mean, it looks tight and it looks good and you feel good because you feel like, wow, this looks fantastic. Well, it failed every time. There's I don't think I've ever done everything or followed a schedule. It just doesn't, our lives don't look, doesn't work that way, right? So if you have like 10 to 10:30, let's say Bible study, 10:30 to 11, something else, like you don't switch from 1 minute to the other, right? You got to stop by, go to the bathroom or something happens. So schedules, it just never worked. But I will say, like Shua did, like having a loose schedule. I only had like few things that were important. I didn't put times down. I would put like, okay, we would do, for example, like Bible study, math, English. And as far as those 3 things got done, sometime during the day, I would be happy. Right?
Yeah.
Unless I had like to go to a school or go to a class or something like that, then that needs to be kept. But having a I think somewhat very flexible and loose schedule, I think, makes you be more successful. And then as far as the home and messiness, we were saying earlier, like we could always have time for cleanup time, right? That could be incorporated into the schedule. But I read when we used to go to Jeannie Baker's class, she was one of the science teachers. At her house, there was a sign that had said that that a home should be clean enough to be healthy and messy enough to be happy. So I said, oh yes, that's it. As long as it's clean enough, they're not going to catch some serious disease, right? Our house was pretty.
These days, you could catch a serious disease.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
that is
can.
true. Gotta have
Not
the
from your,
Clorox
Even if
not
it's-
from your
even-
messy homeschool.
Yes, even if it's clean, you could still catch the messy disease.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's gonna look chaotic. It's gonna get messy. You're gonna have to clean up, or you're gonna have to be happy with what you have. It's like, and some people, they're okay with mess. Some people, like for me, if it gets too messy, I just don't feel, right to be able to teach or do anything.
Yeah.
Right? You just
So distracting.
yeah, it's just very distracting and stressful. Having a lot of things and clutter is very stressful. So yeah, I think, I don't think it just goes without saying, all the families individually have to do what they can that fits their family to be able to do. If you need to have a cleanup and that's your priority, that's what you need. That's what you got to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think what you said about a home being happy, I think laughing a lot, enjoying this time that we have with our kids at home, and seeing it as a gift of grace, as George Sleeman had mentioned before, too. Just receiving it and laughing together, I think would be such a blessing. Yeah, I feel like we can always laugh more together with our kids. And that would be something that they would remember.
Yeah.
One last question, which is one more takeaway. So one last thing that you would think, if you could just remember this, that's what I want you to remember about this time. What would it be? I'll give you a moment to think about that. And then whoever has something, just start.
I think this may be like the foundational principle thing, right? It's just one thing that I could just share with everybody about this time, this particular time of homeschooling, is here's a golden opportunity for you to use this time for discipling your children. I know there's a couple of months of school left and there's work that they need to do, but I don't think you're going to be, or they're going to be, devastated educationally if you didn't get a lot of it done. But if you miss this time and miss this opportunity to connect with your youth, connect with your children, miss the opportunity of discipling, we may not get another chance like this for a long time. And this, God's timing is everything, I think. Maybe he's given us this time because we need this time to catch them at this particular time, whether they're second grade, or they're, senior, ready to go off to college. You got to use this time, take this opportunity and use this time, whatever that you need to do. And I don't think this is a time where we panic about, what are we going to do with school? And, I think you should trust God and see what he can do and see what he does with this time once you invest into their lives by directing them to God, spending this time with disciple, get to know them in a deeper way, spend time, talking about deeper things reading the Bible together.
Mhm.
I would just hate for people to use this time just all worried about school
Yeah.
and miss
Mhm.
what could have huge impact in their children's lives, right?
Mhm.
So, take this as a special gift that God gave you. Maybe opportunities later, but not like this, I don't
Yeah.
think. So
Yeah.
I think one thing that that people could take away is that you use this time very wisely to
Mhm.
see what the Lord wants you to do with this time, with your children, with your
Mhm.
family at this time.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree with Ellen. And a passage that I have just written out and been meditating on for a while, especially with regard to raising our kids, is Colossians chapter 1, verses 28 to 29. And Paul is speaking there about his heart for the Colossians. And I think that it could apply to our heart for our children, just like Alan was saying. And it says, "Him we proclaim, warning everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, that we may present everyone mature in Christ. For this I toil, struggling with all his energy, which he powerfully works within me."
Amen.
So he gives us the energy and the strength that we need to be able to bring our children to Jesus, just like Ellen was saying. And I think that that would be a foundational principle that I wish I had really centered our school on, or our home life on, from the get-go when the kids were really young. And I'm grateful for the fact that we are able to do that right now. Everybody at home,
Yeah.
we have that opportunity, golden opportunity, like Ellen said.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you both so much. Oh, yes.
Well, no, I was going to say, since Shua had a Bible verse, maybe I thought I would end with
Yes,
the Bible verse too.
please.
Yeah. Well, this was something that I was going to bring up in the beginning, but it's a verse that, or these verses the homeschoolers use often when they talk about homeschooling, which is from Deuteronomy 6, where verse 5. It says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." Yeah, similar to what I was saying earlier, but just being able to spend this time to be able to do that. When you rise, when you're eating at home, when you're doing your homeschooling, just be able to just talk about, and also about all of these things that we talked about, and remembering them just throughout the day. Okay?
Thank you both. Thank you so much. Oh, not just yet.
Oh yeah.
Just practical resources.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. Well, if you need a lot more, you could just contact Shua. She has plenty, right?
And
all
so
the
does
information. No, I got rid of all mine. So.
This junior higher level.
Yeah.
This is wonderful for just one devotion a day.
Yes.
That would be very helpful, I think.
One short reading with your children to pray through. And then
we mentioned the website too. Remember?
Yes.
What's that website? As a resource
for
about homeschooling, or
maybe we could write it in the comments later. I can't remember which one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, both of
Thank you. Thank you, Shua. Thank you, Pastor Sam.
And for everything, for blessing us. And I really believe it'll be fruitful.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Happy
everybody.
homeschooling.
Bye.